Happy holidays, my lovely viewers. I hope you're having a fantabulous time. I've been having an alright time. It's Christmas though, so bar humbug. Since it's that time of year that I don't care for, I thought we needed something else to do. And because it's the end of the year and I'm a YouTuber who has no talent, we're going to do a list. Two lists, because I love you all that much. And I also hate you all that much. It's a very confusing emotion. But what list, you ask? Well, the top and bottom 5 list, of course. But what's that, you ask? Shut up, I'm making a video about to tell the top 5 and bottom 5 games of the year, of course. The games I loved the most, the games I absolutely despised. I do get a bit spicy in a few of these, so this is going to be fun. Let's establish the rules for these two lists. First of all, only games that I've played are in the running for a space on the top and bottom 5. They can be covered in either a review or a first impressions, but they have to have been covered on this channel to be in the running. Secondly, the game must have been released in 2022. Now this rule is a bit more fluid. If the game had a version of itself released in 2022, I consider that in the running personally. I think that's fair game. Now, some of you may disagree with some of the choices on my list. In that case, I do have a prepared statement for you. If you disagree with any of the choices I make, any of the positions any of the games take, any games that you just think should have been on here that aren't, prepared statement. me. Fuck you. Number 5, top game of the year. Fuck it, I'm not doing that again.
As well as being a place where a gal can get a murder on, video games are an artistic medium that can and should be used to tell interesting stories and explore new ideas. We've got plenty of Angry Man shooting games, and you can keep the 14th fucking release of that one Elder Scrolls game that people still seem to care about for some reason. Myself, I'd rather play something that has real heart and soul in it that isn't something we've seen a dozen times over. Even if it is just a presentation that sets it apart, that's good enough. Stray is just this, a game made by a talented and passionate developer. In Stray, you play as a small cat exploring a subterranean city after falling in and getting separated from their little kitty cat friends. The gameplay is based around contextual button presses and in truth is nothing particularly deep, but it's all put together and presented in such a way that it can still be entertaining. Having a good flow to the gameplay and a focus on well-crafted puzzles, of course, doesn't hurt either. It's not very long or particularly big, but it is something interesting, and I'd sooner play a dozen games like Stray than another first-person military shooter or live service trash. Let this be something of a lesson. I was looking forward to this game, even knowing the games industry's perverse love of fucking over its audience time and time again, with often at best subpar sequels that can barely muster a fraction of their predecessors' glory. Is it any surprise I was let down? Salt and Sacrifice is the sequel to the absolutely sublime Salt and Sanctuary, the 2D platformer Souls-like that delights me to my very core, only this sequel managed to completely fail in almost every way. Gone was the weighty, viscerally satisfying combat and wonderful interconnected world, and in its place we got a level-based game full of repetitive boss fights with all the weight and impact sucked from the combat. On top of that, the game oversimplified its equipment and decided on a hub-based approach, which in my mind only serves as a detriment to this style of game. Even the art style fails to live up to the previous title. Salt and Sacrifice is a completely unworthy follow-up to a genuinely fantastic game, a fine reminder of why having high expectations for the industry is typically the wrong approach. I was today years old when I discovered that this was in fact a sequel to a previous game. I'd thought it was just a fancy update of the original game, or that the title was just weird for weird's own sake. Okay, it kind of is, but it does make more sense now. Look, I'm just saying that Infinite is one of those subtitles attached to a new game in a franchise when a developer doesn't know what else to call it and just settles on a cool sounding word. Not that it matters really, because Bright Memory Infinite still kicks ass and is an absolute blast to play, even without having played the original. Following a paranormal agent named Chelia, the game has us fight through high-tech soldiers and ancient warriors with some delightfully fast-paced and fluid combat. The game feels designed from the ground up to be as fun and exciting as possible. Even its stealth missions don't hurt the pace too much, as we're still encouraged to maneuver quickly and they don't last overly long. Add to that the game being able to successfully marry ranged and melee combat so effectively and have both be a viable option throughout the majority of the game, and we're left with an experience that might not be overly long, topping out at like an hour and a half at most, I think, but something that's still worth playing. I might even give it another play soon. I forgot how much fun it was. The PlayStation Store is a joke. I remember the days when there were some standards in place and not just any old joker could sell their crap, but sadly Sony saw the buckets of money that Valve makes from its own lack of care and decided to jump on board. And I can hardly blame them though. I'd love to sit around and make money for doing absolutely fucking nothing as well, and Valve is certainly doing just fine by letting any old trash be sold on their storefront, so why shouldn't it work for Sony as well? There were a lot of terrible indie games shat out this year, but Space Explorer's Red Planet is so utterly dull even by the standards of shitty indie games. You fly around Mars for a bit, you touch some lights, then you're done. This is hardly a video game, but anything that makes me think, yep, I'd rather be playing Lizard Lady and the Cats right now is a shoo-in for a place on this list. It's an utterly artless experience that offers nothing to anyone. A recent review topic, like very recent as in 2 weeks ago, but nevertheless a worthy option. Being a Portal fan, I was easily attracted to this title as it plays as if someone was making a digital love letter to Valve's baby. No devs, I've got to say, the only way to get Big Daddy Valve's attention is a fistful of cash. The Entropy Center combines a cool premise with some rather interesting puzzles, seeing you make your way through an orbital facility that watches over the Earth and discovering what happened here and what led to it being so dilapidated. I can't speak to the scientific accuracy of the story's claims, and my scientist is on the lab, I mean off sick, so I'll take the game's word that it knows what it's talking about. Ultimately though, it's a good game with an interesting narrative, whilst it does fall back on many of the tropes of the puzzle game, i.e. the cubes, the lasers and all that sort of stuff. It does present itself and its ideas well enough, and whilst there are a couple of issues here and there, I cannot deny a good time when one was had. So I get the feeling the developer really wanted to create their own version of Doom, only with a wisecracking protagonist in place of a silent protagonist. Unfortunately, Doom is an awesome and polished game that is barrels of fun. Madness Beverage, a game also about a space-age soldier shooting demons from hell, is neither of these things. A very uninspired first-person shooter that really hasn't got anything to offer anyone. Its unique selling point is that the fact that its abilities come from drinks that you find, though calling this a unique selling point feels like stretching the definition a tad. With a loudmouth protagonist who badly needs to shut the fuck up to unimpressive level layouts and boring enemies, is there any surprise that I actually had to re-watch my previous review just to even vaguely remember anything about this game? I could have dealt with the dull-ass levels and the uninspired combat if the voice acting wasn't so fucking terrible, and I could have dealt with that, but the characters just don't shut the fuck up. Full disclosure, this game officially released in 2021, but it came to the PS Store in 2022, and I say that makes it technically viable for this list, and if you don't like that, well... The second of the recently reviewed games to make an appearance, Steel Rising wins out over the Entropy Center, which I also had considered for this slot. After all, they're both fantastic games. Ultimately though, I went with the one where you get to break robots in France. Using the tried and tested Souls-like formula, Steel Rising sets itself apart, both through its setting and tone, as well as its approach to combat and storytelling. A game that is a little bit broken, with it sometimes being entirely too easy for the player to gain a massive advantage that feels like more of a design oversight than an intentional element, but nevertheless manages to be bloody amazing. In a marketplace where Souls-likes are a dime a dozen and are made by people who often fail to grasp the subtleties that designing such a game lives or dies on, it's always nice to see one buckle down and do enough right to be worth a damn. I know it seems cheap that two of my most recent review topics made the list, but A, they both deserve it, and B, it's not been a great year for releases in general. Being boring is one of the worst things a piece of entertainment media can be. A bad game, book or movie at least has something to discuss, but a boring one will make no impact whatsoever and is ultimately a waste of time. Summertime Madness is that exact waste of time, a boring slog through some admittedly nice looking environments for the most part. The game sees an artist trapped in his own worlds by the devil and is being given 6 hours to escape. The gameplay is utterly tedious. The developers had no desire to shift the tone or atmosphere of the game to keep the player engaged, which I spoke about at length in the review video itself, so I won't repeat myself further here. The thing to take away is that Summertime Madness is the worst kind of walking simulator. One that chose to forgo the traditional kinds of gameplay and then replaced it with absolutely fucking nothing. If you know me, you know I enjoy walking simulators, as the good among them work extra hard on their tone and narrative to compensate for the limited gameplay interactions, but Summertime Madness didn't do this important thing. Well done, Summertime Madness, who successfully got a dude to walk around. Hit me up again when you add something worthwhile. I doubt this is much of a surprise to anyone, and I'm fully aware of the fact that this game also won the Game of the Year award, though I wrote this bit before I learned that fact, and to be frank, I still think it deserves this place on my list, so screw it, it's here. Elden Ring was a game I was interested in, plus it was one that I was so excited about that I couldn't sleep the night before its launch, and moreover, it's one that didn't let me down. Taking a formula that traditionally favours a more linear approach and turning it into an open world is a risky move, but for Elden Ring, the gambit paid off. Not only did we get a massive, beautiful world of adventure to explore, but the game still managed to offer segments that played to the strengths of the Dark Souls games that came before it, switching effortlessly from its open world to some linear dungeon levels in a way that made the most of both approaches. Playing as a tarnished in a world on the brink of a new age, there are many paths we can take on our quest to become the Elden Lord. There's tons of awesome equipment, interesting characters, and some truly amazing lore that might not be as dark as what we're used to, but it still retains that level of depth and complexity that makes Souls lore so great. When I first heard that From Software's next title was going open world, I was skeptical to say the least, because a decade of games has taught me that a majority of open world games don't seem to know that when you give us a massive world to play with, you actually have to put shit in it to make it interesting. Elden Ring, you stand as a fine example of how to do an open world right. An utterly sublime experience, it's a truly fantastic video game, and I'll gladly recommend it to all my friends. The worst game of the year to me is not the worst in terms of function or gameplay, not that it'll be winning any awards in these categories, but rather it's here because of what it did to its franchise. The Saints Row Reboot took a series that I genuinely loved and made the clever, witty decision to abandon almost everything that made the original series so good, almost completely regressing to a time where it was little more than a shameless GTA knockoff. The once anarchistic roller coaster of excitement and joy was watered down to the point where the most fun I had with the game was in the writing of my rather mean-spirited review. The game ditched many of the interesting themes and elements from the previous titles and has gone about trying to establish itself as more grounded, forgetting that Saints Row and Grounded go together about as well as China and human rights do. The very worst thing about this game, this journey where we follow a group of youngsters in their quest to build a mighty gang from nothing, is that it's utterly boring to play. It's graphically unimpressive, with every activity you do feeling slow or watered down compared to what we've seen before in the original games, and there's not a single memorable character or moment to be found. Saints Row, you're fucking awful and completely insulting. In a year where we had games like Totally Normal Journey, Space Explorer's Red Planet, Summertime Madness, and all of those fucking awful games by the Voices Studio, you reached the impressive feat of being my personal choice for worst game of the year. At least those other games didn't drag a series I love through the mud.
There we go. I hope you've enjoyed this list. I got a bit salty there at the end of talking about those, didn't I? And a bit passionate, because on the one hand, I love Elden Ring. It's a fantastic open world RPG, a brilliant Souls-like, truly spectacular. On the other hand, Saints Row was a fucking travesty, a complete mishandling of the IP. You made Saints Row boring. That's like... I haven't got a good analogy. It's like making McDonald's healthy. It's just not something you fucking do. Anyway, that's all done now. I hope you have a wonderful holiday period, my lovely viewers. I will be taking a few days off now because I feel like I've earned a proper break. The last few times I've taken time off, either because I was sick or because my dog died. It's not been a great year. So yeah, there won't be a review next week. The next review will be in January. That's not to say it's the last video of the year, as I am currently working on a Fallout 4 challenge run. I'll put a thumbnail icon up here for you to look at. I drew that self-me version person. So you never know, you might get another video before the new year. I won't promise anything. I'm still, at the time of recording this, I'm still in the process of editing that one. There's a lot of footage. Fallout 4's an RPG, long game. Anywho, have a wonderful Xmas period, a wonderful Hanukkah. I don't know what people celebrate, I don't know people. Just have a wonderful holiday. I will see you next year. Take care, my lovelies. I love you all. Mwah. Bye-bye. So, well, let's establish the rules for this little situation. You see what I'm going to do, though, so...
Sorry, I need a moment.
Second up, the game must be released in 2022. Now, this rule is a little bit...
Fuck's sake. I'm never going home, am I?
Right, you. I'm going to call your fucking references at this point. Okay. Serious. Oh, no, I have to...
Do you need... Yeah. Nice! Fucking fist bump me, bro.
But anyway, it's all done. That's the last... Well, this isn't a review, but I did my last review last week. This is the... Fuck. This is a mistake, and Ronica's not using it. So
This is the review of reviews,
Yeah.
maybe.
yes, I'll review myself. 1 star, kind of alright. You know, I might laugh occasionally, but more at you than with you. Fuck
And
no.
my arms are tired.
That's what I mean, yeah. That's what I mean.
1.
And thus concludes the lists. I hope you enjoyed the lists. We should be towards the side because it's written on the whiteboard, shouldn't we?
Shit, yeah, so we...
Okay,
Sorry, help.
that's okay.
Help. Help me.
Right.
Right.
Is that alright?
It's more the angling.